So the first step here is assessing your vendor. Since we're talking about third party, we're mainly focusing on SaaS vendors. But what we've done is internally, we send them, if someone wants to buy a new SaaS service or something like that, we'll send them a survey and ask, what is this? Why do you want it? What does it do? Are you sure we don't already have something like this? But the number one question we ask before we send that is, are you even sending data out? Do we, from a vendor risk management, do we really care about this? Does this need to go through this process or not? And sometimes they'll say yes, they'll know what it is. Sometimes they'll say no. And if they say no, like, well, we're not sending data out, but we still want SSO integration, or we still want to use their AI service. In those things, they may not realize they're sending data out. We need to look at it because they actually are, even though they don't know it. So it still needs to go through this process to make sure whatever data we are sending them to this vendor is being handled appropriately. The second step here, once we know, are you sending data? Yes. Part of our survey is we're asking them, what kind of data are you sending? And a lot of times they'll say, yes, I'm sending data. I need to go through this process. They'll get to this question and they'll say, none. I'm not sending anything. So your users, kind of trust but verify on that. A lot of times they get it wrong. We do ask them this question because if they do say, yes, I'm sending finance data, yes, I'm sending health data, that's probably right. If they're admitting to whatever data they're sending, you can trust that. It's when they say no, that's when maybe we'll go to the vendor's privacy policy or something like that, and the vendor can say, this is the data we collect. So then we can ask that user, they're saying they collect this data, are you sure you're not sending it to them? There's kind of a process there, but trust what they say. We also need to do some verification on that too. The second step is we send our vendors a survey. And a lot of them will say, well, we have a HECVAT. Here it is. Say, okay, for us, that's great. I'd rather have a HECVAT than nothing at all. But if it's just a HECVAT, usually we're not going to move forward. We'll send them our own survey. If they don't want to answer it, that's fine. But we'll ask them, what are your security certifications? If they say, hey, we have a SOC 2, we have an ISO, we'll say, okay, show them to me. Give me the receipt. Let me see it. So if they're not sending that to us, that's a problem. Usually they do. If they say they have a SOC 2, we ask for it, they'll send it to us. Typically it's not a problem. One thing on our survey that's helped us a lot is we ask them for their physical address. And then we'll go and we'll kind of stalk them a little bit and we'll look them up on Google Maps. And a lot of the time, some of the time, a vendor will want to hold your health data, will want to hold financial data, and we based out of a house that looks like this. We've had people trying to hold health data and their address is a house, and they probably just have a server in their basement. That's not good enough for us. We don't want to do business with that vendor. I don't care what you have. That's not okay. And in the contracts, they can even say, well, we'll do unlimited liability. If there's a problem, we'll pay for it no matter what. Well, these people don't have unlimited money, so we have to look at where are their assets. If we can tell by their address as a step that you don't have enough assets to cover a problem if there is a problem, that's something to think about. So getting that address, and there's some other questions, are pretty good indicators of something that's not in the HECVAT, and it's something that we want a third party to attest to your security, not just yourself. And when we get a vendor, we'll put them into tiers. We'll try to identify that. So we have low, medium, high, and critical. And for our low and medium, typically it's based on our data sensitivity. And if you were in the last session in this room, you learned about data labeling and the sensitivity there. But if you're just handling like public data, that's a low vendor, don't really care. So you're in that lower tier. On the high classification, we're saying if you're a top 50 IT spend, if we spend a lot of money with you, even regardless of what kind of data you have, you're going to be a high tier because that's some additional contract language that will help us protect ourselves. Your critical isn't going to fit into a bucket like this all the time. And some of these could be, some of them will, like Microsoft. Your Microsoft budget is going to fall into that data sensitivity, very high, probably your number one IT spend. But things like your HVAC system, that's probably not an IT spend at all. We're not really sending them data. They're still a critical vendor. If our supplier of our HVAC goes out of business, that's a huge problem for us. So it's these things when you think about a critical does not have to fit neatly into all these boxes. You probably won't have very many critical vendors, but I think you may have to do an assessment to say, what are our vendors? You may have lists already, but if you don't, you should think about, get with all your departments and think about what are the vendors we cannot live without.
All right.
And Gina?
And then I'm going to take over from this point. So if any of you are like us, we're small but mighty. There's a few of us to manage a lot of requests, right? And we've got to manage them in a way that people are going to keep coming back to us, which means we have to be pretty efficient and consistent. And so in order for us to handle the amount of vendor requests that we were getting with our current labor, we decided maybe we need to look at this vendor risk assessment through a tiering process and really focus all of our energy on the high and critical and making sure we have documentation that's solid and complete in what we need. And then maybe we don't spend as much time on those low vendors or those, we like private is very much kind of that middle ground of we want it to be good documentation, but if we have to focus on critical or high, we're gonna put our focus there first. So one of the things that help us in our vendor tiering system is determining, do these people need to come to our data management committee, which is the DMC, to be reviewed. So low tiers and medium tiers, maybe the DMC just needs to be notified, or maybe we're talking about that kind of thing via email. But if we've got high and critical tier vendors, that's gonna be a full DMC review and conversation. Multiple people like accessibility, privacy, security, IT, so that we're not repeating budget and expenditures. All of us are in that discussion, including people from the academic side who know the importance of needing those tools to fulfill our purpose. We also talk about, what if we have a vendor long enough that we're gonna renew them? Or what if there's a sort of substantial change, like we just had one, started using AI. It's a vendor that holds PHI for us, which is protected health information. Now they're using AI. What are they doing with our data? Are they training it? Are they training on it? And so those renewals will become necessary as needed based upon the change. But definitely for those critical tiers, we want to bring that back to DMC and make sure we update our documentation and know what's going on. You also could have updates to contracts at that time, because if you have a vendor using AI now in its system and that AI is interacting with your data, you have a contract from 3 or 5 years ago, there probably was no mention of AI in that contract in the way that you need to protect. So another piece that we look at, like Chris said, is the minimum security certification that they have to have. For our low and medium tiers, we're really okay if they self-attest on our external survey that they are compliant with the certain data type. So if we're handing over FERPA data, if they self-attest that they are compliant with FERPA laws and regulations, we generally accept that. For our high tier, which is our WSU restricted data, which typically is things like patient health information, controlled and classified information, some of that more sensitive financial information, we're gonna require a minimum of a SOC 2. That is our baseline that we shoot for every single time. If they're critical tier, we want a SOC 2 and maybe even something like an ISO 27001 or FedRAMP. It just really depends on the situation and the type of data that they are holding for us. When we talk about that security certification and attestation, for low and medium tiers, we're either going to not worry about collecting anything beyond that initial external survey. High tiers and critical tiers, we're going to be collecting it at onboarding and then sometimes annually. I was just taking a look again at a notice of proposed rulemaking for HIPAA security rule. And if any of you work with healthcare data, you know that they maybe want to change all of these things that is going to make management of that data more labor intrusive and cost more money on a lot of entities. And one of those is that you make sure your business associates annually certify with you that they are covering your data in the way that they need to be under the HIPAA security rule. So those are the reasons why we're starting to move towards this with some of our more higher critical vendors. And then when it comes to a disaster recovery plan, low and medium tiers, they're not required, but they're a bonus. If they can give us that documentation through the HECVAT or our surveys about disaster recovery, great. High tier, a general plan is usually acceptable. Critical tier, they must have that dedicated disaster recovery plan. All right, so then we started to think about contractual requirements. So we're doing a great job of working towards this at a data management committee level, getting this documentation, but how do we meaningfully have that follow through the contract process? And so I thought, well, let's just make a nice Excel document with different provision areas, and we will put contractual stipulations in based upon the tier. So for data privacy, for our critical, high, and medium tier vendors, which typically are holding some sort of regulated data or data that has to meet some sort of compliance requirement, I want to see language that has the applicable privacy laws or regulations that apply, if there are any. I want to have a definition of what personal data is, and the vendor must notify us in some way if there's material changes to the privacy policies or notices that they have. Like if you start using AI and now that's collecting a whole bunch of different data. For low tier, which is generally our public data, terms are negotiable. They could strike that whole section and I probably wouldn't be as worried. I'm going to focus more on those other higher tiers. For data security, again, for critical, high, and medium tiers, we want the applicable data security laws and regulations, if there are some, based upon the type of data that's going out. Again, we want requirements that they have to share security certifications with us, because if it's not in the contract, sometimes vendors can tell you no if you ask for a copy of their SOC 2 cover sheet. So we want to require them that they are going to provide us that evidence. And based upon the tier, that's going to be our requirements. And then we also want to require that they report a breach of our data within 72 hours. Again, low tier terms are negotiable, but we prefer having terms that match our medium tiers. For data access and use in the contract, we want, for those critical, high, and medium vendors, we want wording that requires access and use of a minimal amount of personal data to perform the service. We want them only to be using our data per the services that are approved via the contract. And if they want to start using our data for other reasons outside the terms that are written in that contract, we want written authorization have to come from us. We want to ensure that access to the data is restricted to only authorized personnel that need it, and we want them to not sell our personal data or use it to train third-party generative AI. We're actually digging deeper into the AI contractual language at this moment, trying to find a fit for somewhere in this tiered system where we can limit a little more of what happens with our data and AI uses from the vendor. So that's to be determined. Again, low tier, negotiable. For data retention and deletion, we want wording in the contract for those higher tiers that vendor has to retain our data only for as long as necessary to fulfill agreement. They return our data to us as they're instructed in the time frame and in the format that we request, and that they destroy any of our data not returned per NIST 888 guidelines. Again, low is negotiable. Data transfers. So we always ask, where are your headquarters and where are you housing data or where are you hosting data? If they want to transfer large amounts of sensitive PII outside of the country, we really want to know about it. So if we have a critical tier, we're going to put the terms regarding the countries of concern and covered persons in there as defined in the 28 CFR Part 202. That's basically, there's covered countries of concern and covered persons that if you meet a certain threshold of personal data, you should not be transferring data to those certain countries or those certain persons without very specific contractual stipulations. So we're just going to require that to be there in our critical no matter what. High and medium, it's negotiable to have that terms as the government helped us write, not in there. But if we do have an alternative statement that says that if the hosting site of this data changes to a country of concern or a covered person, they have to notify us so that we can then take the steps needed to meet that requirement. And then again, low tier, because that's public, we really leave that as negotiable. What we want our vendors to require of their subcontractors for those higher tiers, we want them to be held to the same privacy and security requirements as stated in the agreement that we're flowing down to them. We want them to flow it down to their subcontractors. Low tier, negotiable. For compliance and audits, like I said, if it's not written in the contract, they don't always have to comply with your requests. So higher tiers, we want that evidence of compliance in the upon request in the format, time frame. So for critical vendors, we're going to ask for that annually. High at onboarding and as needed, so it may be annually at some point for some of our vendors, and then medium at onboarding. Low tier, again, negotiable, but we'd like them to meet the medium threshold. For liability, this is one of the ones that we added more recently as well. Because of all of the security breaches or issues that are going on of vendors that are big vendors but then impact all of us, like the MOVEit, or what was the most recent one that I can't think of right now, that Canvas, that impacted a lot of institutions. We've decided that for our higher tier vendors, we're really going to push for a minimum of $250,000 for liability in our contracts. That's the amount that I think we would have to pay out of pocket if we had to file cyber insurance or something. So that's what we're going to start pushing for. Gone are the days of it's the cost of 1 year term of the contract for you to, that's what you get out of the company. And so that may make some vendors who are smaller, who don't have that kind of funding, be not possible or not feasible for us. Low tier, again, negotiable. Okay, and so again, the contract part of it was really to empower and communicate to the legal team. These are the terms that we want based upon the vendor tier, so that from a data privacy and security perspective, this is what we need in there. If anything falls out of those boxes, they're going to come back to us and ask, is this an acceptable risk that we can take if they won't agree to this and this really isn't in your standard format that you want to ask. It really did hopefully empower them to be able to function a little more independently of us and give us less contracts to review unless something falls outside of those parameters. In my mind, this was a beautiful idea, as they all are when we make them up ourselves, right? I thought this is an easy to read Excel, very clear. So I went to the lawyers with my idea and I said, now you just have to implement this in your terms of service, right? And I kept getting kind of a delayed message or no response. And so finally, when I got them to give me their terms of service that we use generally as a university, and I was able to take what we wanted and implement it and embed it into the appropriate sections. And then I made a new little Excel doc for them to reference. It all worked out. So this slide is really just showing you that my expectation of implementation for this was this, and it ended up having to be this. So it's a good reminder that we all have to meet people where they're at. At the end of the day, we got what we wanted, which is GC to have some terms in our contracts that we want, and will work and reach with us, or work and reach out to us when we need them to provide consultation if people are not wanting to fit in the terms that we're asking for. So, any questions?
Finding it. So, for example, somebody downloads a plugin to Outlook, and it's the HR person. Well, there's some problems, right?
Yeah.
With that they don't understand. Well,
Yeah.
Because you could be emailing PHI. You shouldn't be, but you could be internally.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that app is doing now.
Yeah, I would say we are not perfect. Like, I don't know anybody that could be perfect in today's world in a higher ed setting. And if you think you can, I think you're crazy.
Yeah. From that side, something that's helped us, we've turned off OAuth apps that users can register for. They can't just sign up for whatever app and link it to their account. And we've whitelisted browser extensions. So you can't just download a browser extension without us approving it first. And those two things have helped a lot.
How was the feedback from the user
For
community?
whitelisting, amazingly, we got
All right.
3 calls. People didn't seem to.
But I also would say we've had 5 good years of culture building, right? Getting upper administration buy-in, having enough people throw a fit, and then have upper administration saying, sit down and listen to them, you know?
Okay. That's
So-
we just started our process.
Yes.
And we're going through this
Yeah.
exact same thing.
Yeah.
We are scoring. We use a third-party vendor to score our SOC 2s called UpGuard. But,
Oh, yeah, we've seen that,
And
yeah.
so we're to score the SOC 2s for us. So it's not left to me to, I have a good day and you get a better score, and I have a bad day, you get a worse score.
Yeah.
But
Consistency,
something to give us
yeah.
a standard scoring set for our SOC 2.
Yeah, yeah.
Curious, how do you handle renewals? Do you do a full reassessment every time, or?
It depends on the tier and the data involved. So like that medium tier, if we had it and they were adding new data to it, right, that wasn't covered in the initial, we would want to see that and determine. And usually there's what I would call a subcommittee of us, which is the front line, right? So that's myself as the privacy officer, Chris as the security guy. We have Emma, who's from our Office of Data Governance. Then we have Jessica Stitt, who's from ITS and manages all of the different applications that are being used. So if it's something we're like, there's really no substantial change or material change that makes us relook at that, then we're probably going to document that we looked briefly at it and move on. If there was a substantial change where maybe it was changing a vendor from a medium to a high tier and their security didn't align with what we want, then we would probably take that through a full review again and get everybody on that data management committee, which includes our chief data officer, our registrar, voting members to say, okay. And so far, like when we tell people no on some things or advise them no, we try to help them find a replacement. Really, I can't think of maybe one situation where we really had anybody push back and say, no, I'm going to do this, and to escalate it up to upper administration. We really have been lucky in that aspect. Generally, I find that people want to protect their data. They just don't know what they don't know. And when you kind of open their eyes to somebody who's going to take on PHI that lives in a small, tiny house and maybe doesn't have the money or the time to really provide the security needed, then they're kind of like, oh, thank you, because nobody wants to end up as a poster child for something really bad. And so generally, maybe they deal with it and I don't. I don't know. I haven't.
I mean, if they had a SOC 2 and they're renewing, probably that got expired. So I'll just send them a survey anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no harm in sending a vendor a survey. That's what they're there for.
Yeah. And the AI thing, I think we're going to see a lot of those come through, at least on some of our high ones. It's really getting the people that are out in the field. Like, I had to have the person in my clinic that works with that medical record system every day notify me that that AI change had taken place because I didn't know. And so it's really getting that buy-in from all of the people out in the university that what you do is valuable and know to come to you when it's time. So be your resource for them instead of a stopgap.
You had mentioned accessibility, so Title II, right? Are you guys planning on putting that into this process?
It is, yes.
Our-
I'm sorry,
our
we didn't.
External survey asks for VPAT and
Yes.
has a spot where they can upload it.
Yes, and we've had that in there for a long time as well, so, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you only look at VPAT or do you do anything else?
I don't know what they do. There's a whole
They
department
do
for
a-
accessibility. They'll
Yeah,
do a
they
review
do
and
more of their own review and,
because not all of them provide a VPAT, so then they have to get access to the application and do their own assessment.
yeah. And then they will write an exception sometimes based upon the system,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that will depend if students are using it, if it's just staff, if it's required to be used.
Yeah.
That whole thing.
So again, I don't think we're catching everything, but I think that we have a process. We show that we're trying to educate people. This is the process. We have procedures. All of that stuff is important so that we're maybe catching as much as we can. And I expect it to continue to grow and get busier. And I expect as budgets tighten, people to say, well, I'm just going to use what the university has, because we also have all of our applications listed on a site, which funny enough is like 300 when we know there's really like 30,000 out there or something. But people can go to that register and look at what is there that's already there, so I don't have to go out and recreate something or purchase something.
And something else we've done is we've gotten in front of our legal team in our purchasing and IT. So if legal gets a contract they need to sign, they'll say, well, has it been through DMC yet? And they'll say, what's that?
Yeah.
They'll forward it to us and we'll start it. And then purchasing, before they buy something, they know to send it to us first.
Yeah.
And IT won't install anything without DMC approval. Or we'll ask if it needs approval. Most of the time it doesn't, but
Yeah.
sometimes.
Or Amy back there, who is the
Yeah.
one that grants access to a lot of applications.
Yeah, Amy's great at sending stuff to
She
us. so-
sends us stuff.
Yeah, it's not just,
So-
we're just not hoping the users come to us on their own. We're getting in front of their alleyways to buy things and to get things,
Yeah.
to get it forwarded to us.
Do you get pushback from people that are trying to just do a proof of concept or a zero cost, like, hey, we just want to try this and we don't want to go through the whole process?
Proof of concept's hard. We do try to be more lenient with that, but we'll say, okay, you can use it for 6 months and you can only use it on this kind of data or test data. Or we try to work with them on that because it is difficult for proof of concept.
Yeah.
We won't put them through the whole ringer for some that
Yeah.
may be ending.
And sometimes the committee, based upon the need for the application, may vote not based upon those standards. Like, is this the only company that ever does this, where there's not a lot of options out there and this is a required thing that we need? Like, was one of the ways to get electronic diplomas or something.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that was a small shop of one person, and so it really is not as black and white as some of the tiering system makes it seem, but there are times that we really have to manage and weigh the risks. Does that make sense? The tier system really helps us know where to focus most of our energy on, though, if if we're really going to be critical about something, it's probably going to be on one of those higher tier vendors or critical vendors than anything else.
So for your lows and mediums that aren't storing critical data, are you just doing like the vendor assessment for them all the time?
Basically, for almost any vendor that comes to us, we're going to send the internal user a survey that just says what is it, all that stuff. Then we'll just send the external one anyway. If it's like Otter AI, for example, if it's some company and we want 5 licenses and we're going to spend $200 with them, they're not going to respond to our survey. If we walk away from them, they don't care. They don't know we exist. So a lot of times we have to do everything we can without a survey for those bigger companies like that we're not even on their radar. They wouldn't waste time on us.
Yeah, I can still generally do like a privacy policy review, look at it, does it look like they even know what privacy is, or is this just, so there's some of that review stuff we can do even if we don't have an external survey.
Yeah.
But if I'm seeing any restricted or even private data, I'm usually saying I need an external survey. And if they can't find it or they can't get them to respond, then we're saying, what other options can we offer or find for you? Because this is not going to be okay. If they don't respond to you now, what makes us think they're going to respond when something goes wrong with our data? And we can't get a hold of it because something's happened, We can't access it. So we really are trying to be responsible in that way.
Yeah. And some of those that you just buy with the credit card, we're not able to alter their contract anyway.
Yeah.
So there's a
Yeah.
lot of that. But in those, we just say, since we have data classification in our environment, we say, well, you can't put restricted data into it. It's more of an honor system in that way, but
Yeah. And a policy.
yeah, it is a policy.